Syrian Arab Army continues to chase terrorists in Aleppo and attack their hideouts in Homs and Damascus countryside. A second Russian aid plane arrives at Damascus International Airport. Erdogan's government issues harsh verdicts against former army generals under the pretext of planning for internal strikes. Good afternoon. Syrian Arab Armed Forces on Saturday destroyed a warehouse for ammunition and weapons, killing the terrorists inside it in a Sayyid Ali area near Adwali restaurant in the city of Aleppo. Authorities cleared a hideout for armed terrorist groups in Aleppo. Armenians discovered a hideout for armed terrorist groups inside the 4th Industrial Institute in Suleiman al-Halabi area in Aleppo and cleared it. And in Beirut, in Damascus countryside, a unit of the Syrian Arab Army carried out a successful operation in which it killed members of an armed terrorist group, arrested others, seized their weapons, and discovered stolen medical equipment and smuggled medication. And in Homs, competent authorities pursued an armed terrorist group in Al-Qaeda area in Telkalak countryside, killing and wounding its members and confiscating their weapons. A source in the province said that among the terrorists killed were Youssef Suleiman Fawaz and another who had 3 identity cards, Syrian, Palestinian and Lebanese, with the same name. Another unit of the Syrian armed forces inflicted heavy losses upon an armed terrorist group as it was trying to infiltrate into Syria from Lebanon on Multaqa al-Nahrain area in Telkalak countryside. Competent authorities destroyed a car equipped with DShK machine gun and eliminated 2 of the terrorists who were driving it in Ad-Dusaira in Telkalak countryside. And in a related context, security forces, with the help of citizens, chased an armed terrorist group that were terrifying citizens and the law enforcement forces in Heat Valley in Nawa region in Dar'a's countryside, inflicting heavy losses on them. Syrian TV reporter said a source in the governorate mentioned that the competent authorities killed the head of the terrorist group in Heat Valley, Muhammad al-Alshat, and arrested the rest of the group and confiscated their weapons with a large amount of stolen food supplies. The source also said that the confrontations resulted in the destruction of 4 cars carrying different types of guns. The source mentioned that a unit of our armed forces confronted the terrorist group in a Salamin town, killing one of the terrorists who had no identity card on him, and arrested the rest of the group's members. In Idlib Governorate, competent authorities clashed with an armed terrorist group in Al Zawiya mountain. Authorities also clashed with an armed terrorist group that tried to attack a security checkpoint at the crossing of Martin village in Idlib countryside. Syrian TV correspondent quoted a source in the governorate as saying that the Syrian army units chased the terrorists and that tried to flee towards the bushes surrounding the town. The clash resulted in the death and injury of a number of terrorists and the martyrdom of 1 of law enforcement members. In Latakia, competent authorities confiscated 30 kilograms of C4 material in Al-Mashwa al-Sabi' neighborhood, seized weapons and ammunition in Tabiyat neighborhood, and confiscated 1,200 boxes of stolen medical items in Shretih neighborhood.
Following intensive investigation in Latakia, authorities confiscated large amounts of the highly explosive material C4 in a residential area. The material was stored in a refrigerator in a house at Al-Mashru' al-Sabi' neighborhood. Authorities also broke into a terrorist hideout at Al-Tabiyat neighborhood, where they found weapons including automatic war rifles, snipers, bomb-action machine guns, RPG and guns, in addition to communication devices, masks and ammunition. In Al-Makatib Street at Shraitih neighborhood, authorities seized large quantities of medical items stolen from Aleppo and stored in a warehouse. The stolen material included 1,200 boxes of medicine produced by City Pharma and Sandy Pharma medical companies. The value of stolen boxes is estimated at 25 million Syrian pounds. A man involved in the robbery was arrested.
Members of the Syrian community in Italy staged a sit-in in front of the Italian parliament to express their support to their homeland and reject foreign intervention in its internal affairs.
Italian MPs, journalists and activists from various Italian political parties joined the Syrian community sit-in. Bishop Hilarion Capugi, the Bishop of Jerusalem in exile, took part in the sit-in. Participants demanded an independent European stand and lifting the sanctions imposed on Syria. They rejected the Takfiri mentality that threatens security and stability in the region. They also expressed support to the Syrian Arab army that faces a global war which targets the will of all peoples in the region. They carried placards saying, "Lift your hands off Syria, no for the colonial powers, and yes for the political reform and dialogue." They also prepared a record carrying the signatures of a large number of Italians and sent it to the head of parliament, Gianfer Encofini, to express their denunciation of the sanctions imposed on Syria and the Western policies that support terrorists and provide them with money and arms. The participants also organized a seminar near the parliament to reveal what is truly taking place in Syria and expose the claims and lies broadcasted by some media.
A Russian aircraft carrying a second batch of aid arrived in Damascus International Airport on Friday with 38 tons of food supplies on board. Earlier on Thursday, a Russian aircraft loaded with the same amount of food supplies arrived in Damascus International Airport. The cargo included sugar, meat, milk, and canned fish for displaced families. The distribution of aid will be carried out in coordination and cooperation with the Ministry of Social Affairs and Labor and the Syrian Arab Red Crescent, in addition to non-governmental organizations. While the U.S. claims to fight terrorism, it supports it at the same time. American President Barack Obama acknowledges the increase of Al-Qaeda terrorists in presence in Syria. The American contradiction is especially clear in what's called countries of the Arab Spring, where America has supported terrorists and brought them to power. The White House described the attack on the American consulate in Benghazi as a terrorist act that might be linked to Al-Qaeda.
Narrowly and forcefully on groups like Al-Qaeda, the ones that carried out the 9/11 attacks and the ones that still threaten U.S. interests. And those forces have not gone away. We've decimated Al-Qaeda's top leadership in the border regions around Pakistan, but in Yemen, in Libya, in other of these places, increasingly in places like Syria, what you see is these elements that don't have the same capacity that a bin Laden or core Al-Qaeda had, but can still cause a lot of damage, and we've got to make sure that we remain vigilant and are focused on preventing them from doing us any harm.
The harsh sentences of a Turkish court against former generals in the Turkish army have aroused fury and condemnation among Turkish secular parties and families of the generals. Turkish secular circles denounce the accusations of trials and describing them as an act of oppression to silence the opposition and to pave the way for the country to come back to the religious rule that prevailed during the Ottoman era. Members of the sentenced generals' families shouted slogans against the jury and denounced the verdicts, while the public threw water glasses and bottles at the court. And with this, we come to the end of our news for today. For more news, you can visit our website in English, www.syriaonline.sy. For now, stay with us after the break. Khalid